Shalom and good morning. How are you guys doing today? Welcome to the end of 2025. This is the last Sunday, December 28th. Next Sunday that you're here, it'll be the new year, and you'll have a whole bunch of new things to think about. How exhausting. Last year at this time, Carly and I were in Florida. We went to college together at Harding for 5 years, and, we were young, and life was moving at a good pace. And then we went to Florida for the past 6 years, and it seems like a long time. Looking back, it's not that long. But last year at this time, we might have been visiting. I don't actually remember. But we were living in Tallahassee, making the decision. I think we're going to move back to St. Louis this upcoming summer. And so it seems like this whole year has just kind of flown by, getting through spring, in grad school, so doing coursework during that. And then in May, I went to Abilene, Texas to do 2 weeks of intense coursework, 8 to 5 every day, the same class, homework all evening. I loved it. It was a blast. But it's exhausting, right? It's tiring. You're doing all these things all the time. And plus, from Tallahassee to Abilene was like a 19-hour drive. And so I did that in a day, and then stayed with a friend, and then went to my parents on the in-between weekend, and then went back to Abilene and did another class, and then drove 19 hours home in a day. It was exhausting. But that was just the beginning of summer, and this is the summer that we had decided that we were moving back to St. Louis. So it's 12 hours from Tallahassee to St. Louis, and this is the trip that we made, and we wanted to come see Carly's parents. And, we came up at the beginning of June because we were going to do High Teen Week. We were going to be counselors at High Teen Week, Bible teachers at High Teen Week, and that was a long drive, but we decided, hey, we're just going to bring as much stuff as we can and put it in I think we had already decided we were going to stay at the Weiler's rental, and so we brought all of our stuff and we put it in, or we didn't bring all of our stuff, we brought a third of our stuff, maybe not even a third, but I had a full truck, full trailer, Carly's driving the Highlander, we packed it all up and we came up here for High Teen Week, and of course, tornado hit, no High Teen Week, but that was okay because I had some homework to do. But then we drove back, and then we had a couple of weeks, and then VBS. I was really involved with VBS. Carly was as well. Actually, she was probably more involved because she actually taught a class. I was just acting like a fool on stage for 5 days straight, kind of like today. But then we had Florida Bible Camp at the second week of July, right? Yeah, second week of July we had Florida Bible Camp, which is great. Exhausting, but it was great. I wrote the curriculum for that. And so I spent a lot of time in prep for Florida Bible Camp. And then we were there for a week. We were counselors, Bible teachers, the whole nine. And then that second week of July, that was Florida Bible Camp. The fourth week of July was All Teen Week. And that week right in the middle is when we actually moved all of our stuff. So that was another drive all the way up, fully loaded down all of our stuff. And then we had All Teen Week the last week of July. And then I drove back to Tallahassee the week after that and got almost the rest of our stuff. Drove back up here. So I'm like summer exhausted. We had actually settled and gotten here. We had gone back and forth to Tallahassee 3 times, 12 hours one direction. So, and on top of, 2 Bible camps, VBS, whatever else you can think of that makes you busy during the summer. You know what I'm talking about. Life is busy. And it wasn't much longer after that. Steve and I drove back to Tallahassee and got a car that was broken down. So we've done and you've done a lot, and you know what that feels like. But we're coming up to the end of the year, and we are all exhausted. We are tired. Now, a couple weeks ago, I was starting to feel bad on Monday, and Tuesday rolled around, and I felt even worse, and ended up having a fever, and I had the flu. I didn't know that I had the flu until the Friday after I got sick, but I was basically laying on the couch, quarantined to the living room, so that I didn't get Carly sick on the last week of classes. But, I'm stuck on the couch, sleeping most of the day, sleeping most of the night, and in my in-between times, I'm either scrolling social media or I'm watching the second season of Andor, which, if you haven't seen Andor, it's the best Star Wars out there, or watching some random movies, whatever. It was me and the TV or me in the back of my eyelids. Those are my 2 options for like a week. And you would think that would be restful, but I just didn't feel much better after that time, and so I was kind of worried that I was infected. So we finally went to urgent care, and turns out I had the flu. But at urgent care, we probably got there about 5 o'clock, 5 p.m., and sat in the waiting room till 8:30 before they were able to see me. And it was great. Shockingly enough, we got in there. They said, it's going to be a while. I'm like, that's okay. And I sat there and I made a conscious decision to not get out my phone, to just sit there and just stare at the wall and relax a little bit. Didn't know it was going to be that long, but it was 2.5 hours of me just sitting and just looking at the wall. And it was great. It was the most restful thing that I had done while having the flu. And that's like sleeping, not eating that much, and watching a bunch of TV. Like, I'm laying around not doing anything. And the most restful experience that I had was just sitting there, staring at a wall for 2.5 hours. And it reminded me of something that I know to be true, and I've known to be true for a long time, but true rest isn't about doing something else. True rest is about stopping. So that's what I'm talking about today. Now, I don't know you guys nearly as well as I should before getting up to preach a sermon. That's just how it is. You know, it's good to know your congregation before you start telling them how they should live their life, which I'm not going to do, I promise. But that being said, I don't know exactly where you are on how much of the Bible do you consider to be for you or for someone else, or how much of it is your story? I mean, how much are you reading on your own? How much are you thinking about it on a day-to-day basis? Like, how much are you theologically minded? Do you sit around and come up with sermon ideas for fun, like some of us? Maybe not. But to start off, to help you understand, like the Bible Project, if you know the Bible Project, I believe that the Bible is a unified story that leads to Jesus. And this is how I read it. I think of this thing as a phenomenal story that's my story, that I'm a part of. It starts with one guy and has a whole family, and then that family becomes the chosen people of God, and through that chosen family, through centuries of pain and agony and a conflict and relationship with their God, bring forth the Savior of the world who invites the Gentiles in so that they can be a part of the same family, so they can be grafted into the family of God. You know this story. This is the story that I try to live out on a day-to-day basis, but it starts here, thinking of it as a story, thinking of it as my story. And what I like to do with my story is I like to go back and I like to look at the Old Testament parts. They're some of my favorite. And so what I'm going to do today is we're going to jump in at Exodus 19, if you'd like to follow along. I personally like to follow along with a paper copy. I don't know how you guys feel, but Nathan got a new Bible. Show everybody your new Bible, Nathan. See, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I love it. I'm a huge fan. But Exodus chapter 19, if you don't know where we are in the story, that's okay. Moses, everybody knows Moses. Moses was in Egypt, and he left Egypt because he killed an Egyptian, because he was kind of identifying with his Hebrew slave brothers and sisters, and he kills an Egyptian, and he gets found out, so he flees. And God meets him in the wilderness and says, go back and get my people, get them out of there. So Moses goes back, talks to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's like, no, those are my slaves. And Moses was like, no, those are my people. And so, plagues. God intervenes. He stretches out his hands and he touches Egypt in a way that is rememberable. Memorable. Hey, that's so much better. Memorable. Yeah. But then Moses takes the Israelites and he gets them out of Egypt, cross the Red Sea, finally escape from Pharaoh. They get to the other side. Pharaoh and all of his chariots are at the bottom of the ocean, and Moses and the people start dancing with tambourines and singing a song, and how great is that? But then we get to this part in Exodus chapter 19. They've crossed the wilderness, and they're at Mount Sinai. So this is the beginning of chapter 19 of Exodus. On the first day of the 3rd month, after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain, Mount Sinai. See how that works? Then Moses went up to God, and Yahweh, I don't know if you noticed, but in the Bible it's all capital letters, L-O-R-D, just a future reference. It's the divine name Yahweh left untranslated. So I like to say Yahweh, because then you know that it means Yahweh. Starting in verse 3 again. Then Moses went up to God, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain and said, this is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, Then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words that Yahweh had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said," or Yahweh has said. So Moses brought their answer back to Yahweh. Yahweh said to Moses, "I am going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you." Then Moses told the Lord, or Yahweh, what the people had said. Now I love this little passage because this is the birth of the covenant between God and Israel, God and the whole people. He's basically saying to them, I have saved you already. Now I want to be your God and I want you to be my people. And I'm going to lay before you a covenant, a set of laws, a set of bylines, because I need you to be separate from the rest of the world. I need you to be different. You're going to be my people and I'm going to be your God. You just have to abide by this covenant. And the people respond and they say, yes, we will do what you have said. And we know from the rest of the story that that is not the case. But this is the covenant that the chosen people of God had with their God, Yahweh. And it is a covenant that we can see, and there's a lot of pieces of it. And there's pieces of it that we like and pieces of it that we don't like in this modern perspective that we have. But there's so much wisdom to be found here. This is the story of our people, and I know that there's a lot of things that changed with Jesus coming in, inviting us in so that we can be Messianic Gentiles, if you would like. That's the term I very like to consider myself, Messianic Gentile, recognizing the Jewish heritage. But there's still some beauty and some wisdom to look back on the story that we consider ourselves to be a part of. Now, that passage that I just read in Exodus chapter 19, shortly following Exodus chapter 20, starting in verse 1, we recognize this. What did I say? Oh yeah, Exodus 20, just making sure. And you'll recognize this part. And God spoke all these words, I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. What are we starting right here? 10 Commandments. You all know the 10 Commandments? Maybe not all of you, but most of you are going to know the 10 Commandments. Because it's part of this covenant of God and Israel that we still think has the exact same amount of weight that it did here on the mountain. Right? We think about this all the time. You shall have no other gods before me. The first commandment. We can almost take that and say, this is our commandment. We skip a couple chapters and talk about slavery and food offerings. That's not our commandment. But this right here, this is our commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. It's a weird balance, right? Because no, we are not under the same covenant that these people at Israel were, but at the same time, this is still true. I mean, Jesus would agree with this. Jesus is the one that we pay our homage to. This is still true. We still agree with pretty much all of these 10 commandments. This one's good. Verse 4, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, Yahweh your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. We agree with that one too. Let's not make idols and let's not worship things here on the earth. Wow, that's good. Verse 7, you shall not misuse the name of Yahweh your God. Actually, that's kind of a bad translation. What the King James actually has a better translation. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That take right there, what this is translating as misuse, it doesn't mean take as in speak. It means take as in carry or bear. You shall not bear the name of Yahweh in a worthless manner. You shall not carry his name. It's more about representation. You shall not call yourself a child of, you shall not call yourself God's holy person in a meaningless way. I mean, how relevant is that today? In today's age, a bunch of people who call themselves Christians and do a bunch of terrible things. I mean, we do that, that's an entire sermon on its own. Verse 8, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Oh, we kind of skipped this one. Okay, moving on. Verse 12, honor your father and your mother so that you may belong in the land Yahweh your God is giving you. Sometimes we skip that one too. 13, you shall not murder. Still good. Still good. You shall not commit adultery. Still good. You shall not steal. Still good. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Sometimes. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Yeah, so like most of these, we still almost could consider laws for us today if we want to be right with God. And rightly so, but we definitely like to skip that Sabbath one. And I don't think that's a great way of looking at it. I'm going to jump over to Deuteronomy, where Moses is talking to an entire different generation. Deuteronomy chapter 5. Oh, I had it marked. Look at that. Deuteronomy chapter 5. Moses is talking to an entire new generation of Israelites. So the generation that came out of Egypt and was saved ended up having some bad issues with God. And he's like, well, you're not going to enter into the promised land, so I'm just going to let you hang out in the wilderness until you're not there anymore. And the next generation will come into the wilderness. So this is Moses speaking to that next generation. And you need to know that because it makes the beginning of this great. First one, perfect. Moses summoned all Israel and said, "Hear, Israel, the decrees and laws I declare in your hearing today." Today, 40 years later from the Mount Sinai, or Mount Horeb, as he's going to call it here. "Learn them and be sure to follow them. Yahweh, our God, made a covenant with us at Horeb." That's Mount Sinai. "It was not with our ancestors that Yahweh made the covenant, but with us, all of us who are alive here today. Yahweh spoke to you face to face out of the fire on the mountain. At that time I stood between the Lord and you to declare to you the word of the Lord because you were afraid of the fire and did not go up the mountain." I mean, isn't that fascinating? He knows it's 40 years later, completely different set of people. That's like the whole point, is that generation that was there wasn't there. And he says, God didn't make a covenant with them, he made a covenant with you. He spoke to you face to face. Now, just in that alone, I find so much wisdom about how we should think about God. Because all truth is God's truth. If it was true a long time ago, it's true today. If God said it a long time ago, there's something about it that was true, even if it's in a different context than the context we find ourselves. That doesn't mean that it was false back then and it's true now. There's this relationship that we have to have with how we read and think about God and His perspective on the world around us, and what wisdom we can pull from that so that we can live lives according to how we were designed to live. But here we have all of the same commandments that were in 19, except there is a little bit of a difference. So, back in Exodus, the reasoning for the Sabbath. You don't have to turn there, I'm going to do it quick. In 20 verse 8, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day, therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." So he says, follow the Sabbath, do work on 6 days, but not on that seventh day. And it's because God made everything in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh. So God considers the Sabbath holy, you shall consider the Sabbath holy. But if we flip over to Deuteronomy, in verse 12, sorry, slide runner. Oh, nice, keeping up, I love it. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12, "Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy as Yahweh your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest, as you do." So that the servants may rest as well. There's another reason. "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that Yahweh your God," this generation who wasn't maybe not born yet, you were slaves in Egypt. "And Yahweh your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore Yahweh your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." Fascinating. We got two different generations, same law. Remember the Sabbath because I rested, so you're going to rest 1 day a week. And that's the generation that actually were slaves and came out of Egypt. And then you have this next generation who maybe didn't experience being a slave in Egypt, but Moses is saying nonetheless, you were slaves in Egypt, and you're going to work for 6 days, and you're going to take the seventh day off because you were slaves in Egypt. Because you know what it's like to work incessantly, to never stop. So you're going to keep going. Now, I've said a lot of things so far, and I've talked a lot about Old Testament covenant and the Hebrew Bible and God's covenant with His chosen people, the family that we are grafted into, of course, but of course there's a little bit of a different understanding there. These aren't exactly for us, but there's wisdom to be found there. But you don't know why I'm telling you all of this. Why did this turn into a review of the Ten Commandments? Am I telling you that we're supposed to be following 10 when we normally just follow the 9 or maybe 8? No, I'm not. I'm not doing that. I don't think that is the right way to read this section of Scripture. It's not a direct command. I hope I've made that clear. But I do think that our lives would be drastically different if we did attempt to follow Sabbath as if the God of the universe deemed it important. There is wisdom to be found in the story that we've been grafted into. So what I am trying to get at is that we are tired. Tired from years of constant movement, constant hustle and bustle from trying to be a part of the empire machine without always realizing it. You know, Egypt was just an empire. You know, you had people at the top making a bunch of decisions for everybody to follow, building all kinds of stuff, creating mass amounts of wealth, and it just like trickled down to all of the lower class people and the slaves having to do a bunch of work and never getting a chance to break, and never being valued for being people, but being valued for what they could accomplish. I mean, Egypt is just an empire. The Romans were an empire. I mean, it's just mass industry continuing on, spreading power and wealth. America is just an empire, you know? The United Kingdom is just an empire. I mean, anything that you can think of, people that band together over power and wealth and trying to gain mass control and tyranny, they're just empires. It's just all Egypt. It's all Egypt, and we're the chosen people of God who are supposed to stand against Egypt. We're supposed to not conform to Egypt, but we're tired because we tend to just participate in Egypt. Our modern Egypt that we pledge allegiance to teaches us that we are successful by owning property, being financially stable enough to enact our freedoms, and being pillars of the community with certain levels of status and prestige. We chase these things endlessly through our jobs, our home lives, our schooling, our weekend chores, and sometimes even our church lives. We commit ourselves to 40-plus hour work weeks, plans all weekend, and constant little projects like laundry, dishes, figuring out what to eat, keeping the lawn nice, Steve, and various other maintenance tasks. We are tired, and frankly, it isn't getting easier. We grow older with every passing day, and the energy doesn't seem to be what it used to be. We weren't designed to not stop. Well, that's exactly what Sabbath means. Rightly so, we normally associate rest with Sabbath. That's okay. It is the seventh day that we do no work because Yahweh rested. We too, in all of our households, we rest. When Yahweh rested in Genesis 2, there's kind of a sense that He took up His place within creation to dwell in it on His throne. But rest in Hebrew is nuach or noach, where Noah's name comes from. Noah's name actually means rest, and it's because Noah is supposed to bring rest to creation by the ark and the flood and restarting of creation. I mean, that's a whole sermon too. But Shabbat, the Hebrew word that we get Sabbath from, in Hebrew is the noun version of the verb to cease or to stop. Like it literally means stop, as in don't continue to do what you've been doing the rest of the week, which is doing things. Yahweh seemed to think that it was important that His people, a treasured possession compared to the rest of the world, needed to stop once a week from their hustle and bustle, freshly out of Egypt. His design for those that He wants to give life to includes stopping. In Egypt, they were slaves. They didn't get a day off. The first thing He wanted to tell His people is you need to take a break because you're my people. Not because your value is in doing things or accomplishing tasks or being a part of this empire engine. No, you're valuable because you're my people. So take a day off and remember that I'm with you. In the Exodus rendering of the Sabbath command, the reason given is because Yahweh rested, which could be seen as Yahweh inviting his people to rest alongside him in creation. Now, how wonderful would it be if we did that? We have a tendency, and I speak from experience, to just change tasks through the day and through the weekend. We get up and get ready for work, go to work, stop working to eat, which may involve driving around, continue to work through the afternoon, then fight traffic on the way home, maybe stop at the grocery store, get home, cook dinner while answering emails, maybe clean up the kitchen after dinner, and then spend the rest of the evening resting by watching TV, reading a book, or doing a hobby. Then the weekend hits and we have to do all the chores we ignored in our weekday evenings. Then Sunday hits, we get dressed up, come to church, go home, maybe take a nap, and then prep for the work week. Now, if you have kids, you know that all of this is just amplified greatly. We know that we do too much. We talk about it all the time. Someone asks, "How are you?" And what do we say? We're fine. We're busy. We have endless amount of tasks to accomplish. We're busy. Remember what Travis said a few weeks ago. Busyness is not a virtue. But it isn't just the busyness that's the problem. Having tasks to accomplish is not wrong. We have families that need support, companies that we are trying to help prosper, and we do own property that needs maintaining. Well, I hope. We're working on it. We're trying to get us a house soon so that we can maintain it, I think. I hope. Steve, you got me. One of our big problems is that we don't rest well. We think that we are resting when we are vegging out on the TV or reading a novel or scrolling social media because we are allowing something other than ourselves to give us endorphin kicks over and over, but we aren't actually resting. We are allowing our brains to be pummeled with new, useless information or dreamlike scenario. We are escaping. Maybe we developed this practice from parts of our lives we don't enjoy, and rather than working through them, we use false realities behind screens to escape. I mean, how much easier is it in life if you're not enjoying your day or you're not enjoying the company of your own family or anything to just pull out your phone and just escape? I mean, I do that all the time. When I had the flu, I did not feel good. So I was either asleep or I was escaping and I was watching TV. Now, okay, I was sick. I was supposed to let my body rest. I understand. That's fine. But it's not restful. Remember what I said. The first actually restful and good thing that I did was when I was sitting in the waiting room for 2.5 hours doing absolutely nothing. I let my brain process. I was just thinking. I was just letting things come through. And I got to working on my sermon, just there in my head, you know? It was like I finally had time to think about something. I finally had the mental clarity, the mental space. So I charge you, put down your phone. There isn't anything good on there anyway. Turn off the TV. You are just watching other people live lives instead of living it yourself. Same goes for fantasy books. I'm sorry, Carly. Let your head breathe, your brain process. Start finding little ways to rest. Actually rest by Shabbating, by stopping, perhaps staring at a wall. This afternoon, maybe this upcoming holiday, take 30 minutes or so just to sit in silence and rest. Develop this practice. Do it over and over again. And over time, it can morph into time spent in prayer, both speaking to God as well as listening to what the Spirit has to say. I also know from experience that we have a tendency to drown out the Spirit that speaks to us with the noise of the world. We must create a space to allow the presence of God to be heard in our lives. And the only way to truly do that is to Shabbat, to stop, to shut up and listen, to rest from the never-ending forward motion of progress. Truer rest can't be found anywhere but in His presence. I'll invite the praise team up as I close. But in Matthew chapter 11, verse 25 through 30, Jesus delivers a beautiful line to His followers just after praising the Father for bringing them into this relationship of love. And I'll read that now. Matthew 11, starting in verse 25. At that time Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. You think Jesus was good at Shabbating and dwelling in the presence of his Father? Verse 28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Do we believe that? Do we believe that we find rest in Jesus? Do we turn to screens to rest instead? Do we believe that his yoke is easy? Do we think that escaping instead of stopping can lift the burdens that we bear? Can we stop? Can we Shabbat our lives at least once a week for perhaps a good chunk of the day to spend some time with the God of the universe who dwells within us? Think that through as we stand and we sing.